Yeah.
Welcome back to the Daily Wrap. It's potluck time. This is the part of the show where we go around the table and share our favorite stories of the day. Heather Hansen wearing coral, I'm going to call it. All right, Brad just called it.
Thank you.
We just had a discussion about what
Weiner
color
line.
my shirt is, my dress is.
You're looking well.
Coral
What are you
works.
serving
Thank
up?
you. So in Texas, there's a bill that is pending that is similar to a bill that passed in Florida but is now caught up in the legal process. And this involves whether or not doctors can put in their medical records whether a patient has a gun. So they're trying to make it illegal for a doctor to put it in the medical records whether or not a patient has a gun. And they did so in Florida. It was called Docs versus Glocks, because the doctors were all up in arms about this, and they wanted to be able to have these conversations with their patients. They wanted to be able to put it in the medical record if they felt it was relevant, and they felt it infringed on their First Amendment rights. The court said it does not infringe on your First Amendment rights, and you cannot put that information in there. What I'm not sure about is why it's relevant. You know, the doctor's position is that it is a risk to children in the house, it's a risk to the people in the house, but so is drunk driving. And in fact, more people die from drunk driving. Right.
You know?
And you don't ask someone, do you drink and drive?
What kind of car do you have?
Right, exactly.
I can think of one circumstance where it might be, and that's if it's a mental health issue. Right? But short of a mental health issue, then you're actually using your position as a doc to legislate people's lives, which will also erode the trust between physicians and their patients. And that's a very bad, whatever short-term gain that makes on gun safety, it's going to be a real long-term problem.
They'd be better getting a full accounting of the toys in the house because they're more
choking
dangerous.
That's true.
hazards.
Poisoning is
Right.
that is true.
Where do you keep the liquid plumber?
I do understand doctors' position that legislation shouldn't be in my examining room. You shouldn't start telling me what I can and cannot ask. But I also think that it's none of your business. And I think that if a doctor asked that, the response would be none of your business.
Well, that's up to the patient.
Well, right. But to start to legislate what goes in the examining room, I do understand the doctor's concerns. That's what I do every day. I work with doctors, I defend doctors, and so I understand the concerns. But here I just think it's such an overreach. And I think that the people who are concerned about the Second Amendment and infringements on that right have a right to say this is enough is enough. You're not gonna
Doctors need
ask me
to
those
investigate
questions.
in a lot of situations, and primarily with my wife's an ER doctor, and drug seekers come in all the time, and they have those stomach ailments that you can't quite track, right? And it's the same people coming in all the time, and after a while she has to say, no, you're not getting what you're coming here
Dilaudid.
for, or you have a drug problem and
Right.
you need to check in somewhere.
Right.
And sometimes, is that stepping over the line? I know this is
No.
different,
But that's
medical.
part of your body. That is something you're ingesting. This is a way of life. It is a lifestyle choice.
That's
and
her
it's the
doing
same
her
thing as
job.
like drinking and driving. It's
Right.
something that you're doing outside of the body. And I think that while doctors have maybe in the right intentions, it's none of their business.
I agree. And your wife's just doing her job
Yeah.
when she does that.
Exactly.
She's not, snooping or anything else.
Well-
She's trying to keep you healthy. It's your body.
Right. The drug seeker example was probably a bad
Yeah, I mean,
one,
if
but
someone
sometimes she
comes
has
in-
to ask questions that make people uncomfortable.
Yeah.
They may seem personal, but that's the only way she could extract
Correct.
information.
Right. If someone comes up with a bullet wound, you're going to ask, were you shot?
Right.
I mean, there's a good time where it's actually
Right.
relevant. Most of the time, not so much.
I don't know if she asked that when she gets the bullet wound. So where'd this little nick
Got
come
a
from?
pretty good idea that
This is
somebody
looking
was
like
shot.
you might have had a gun in the house.
Well,
I know.
speaking of personal questions and bullet wounds,
Nice segue,
Yeah, look at
Brad.
that.
Garissa University, this is a bitter cup I'm serving tonight. 147 people murdered simply because they're Christian. And it was with questions. The murderers went door to door in a dorm, and they asked people, can you recite verses from the Quran? And if they couldn't, they were shot where they stood. Now, at some point, the rising tide of genocidal hate toward Christians, especially in Africa and in the Middle East, has got to be addressed. We talked before about Indiana and religion and religious rights and respect. Wouldn't it be interesting if between now, at least through Easter Sunday, whether you're progressive or traditionalist, Christian, Muslim, Jewish, atheist, I don't care, we decide that actually that has got to stop. We've got to rise beyond the differences of what you interpret for pizza and not for pizza and gay marriage and not gay marriage. Understand, if there are people working through hallways saying, can you recite from the Quran, and if not, you're dead simply because you're Christian, that's a bigger problem than most of the stuff we're losing sleep over, and we better mobilize around it or we will live to regret it.
I guess the question is, how do you do that? Is it sending ground troops into, obviously we're all in agreement that something has to be done, that this is a Christian genocide that we're witnessing, but how do what kind of sacrifice? Well, I just want to see is a shared sacrifice. We've talked about this in this show before.
Right.
You know, that if all the nations of the world, the civilized ones anyway, gave up 5,000 troops, and you add all those numbers up, and then before you know it, you could wipe out these people. But no one seems to want to address it.
No one seems to want to until it's too late. And what we know from history is it will get to be too late. And God help us if that happens. Is that troops? Maybe. But imagine if right now everyone who's upset about it simply said, whatever else we're fighting about in the name of religion, we're going to come together. Just 72 hours, because they're doing it on purpose. They know it's Holy Week, and there's a tradition of doing that. The way the Nazis exploited Jewish festivals, they're exploiting Holy Week. Stop it.
And we'll have to end on that note. Very, very well said, Brad. Thank you. And we'll have to take a quick break, but don't worry. When we come back, I'll have even more potluck, including my own and Mr. Unger's. This is The Daily Wrap, and it's only on Newsmax TV.
Attention homeowners.
And welcome back to Daily Wrap. I'm your host, Joe Conchin. If you're just joining us, we're in the middle of our potluck, where we're sharing our favorite stories of the day. Rick Unger, what do you got for us tonight?
Well, tonight's is under the heading of how do you solve a problem like Senator Tom Cotton? Now, you'll remember that Senator Cotton was the ringleader who wrote the letter that was sent to the Iranian government telling them exactly how they felt about the deal that our president was negotiating with them. Now, last night, Senator Cotton was on Wolf Blitzer over at CNN, and he basically had a message for the gay people in America, which is, you think you got it bad here, relax, because you could be living in Iran. Let's show that clip.
Well, Wolf, in Arkansas, we believe in religious freedom. That's one reason why our
Well, everybody believes in religious freedom.
that's one reason why our
But the question is the discrimination, potential discrimination against gay Americans.
The Religious Freedom Restoration Act was signed by former Arkansas Governor Bill Clinton in his first year in office. These laws are modeled on that, and a lot of the concerns about discrimination haven't been borne to bear over the last 20 years. But I also think it's important that we have a sense of perspective about our priorities. In Iran, they hang you for the crime of being gay. They're currently imprisoning an American preacher for spreading the gospel of Jesus Christ in Iran. We should focus on the most important priorities that our country faces right now. And I would say that a nuclear-armed Iran, given the threat that it poses to the region and to our interest in the region and American citizens, is the most important thing that we'd be focused on.
All right, so did Governor Hutchinson...
So in Iran, they hang you if you're gay. And to Senator Cotton, that's a good enough reason that gay Americans should just chill out on their rights, because it could be worse. They could be in Iran. You know what, Senator Cotton? If you had sent your letter, if you were a senator in Iran, you know what would happen? If you had gone against your government there, you'd be hanging by your thumbs inside of a freezer somewhere. So you know what? Don't worry so much about Barack Obama, Senator Cotton. It could be worse. You could be serving in a legislature in Iran.
That's powerful stuff, because he is watching tonight. I understand from his Twitter feed.
I'm sure he's
Cotton or the
Enjoy your
president or
dinner.
Iran?
Both, of course.
Yeah, we're worldwide,
Of course.
DirecTV.
Yeah.
Clearly.
I mean, you know, he just makes the issue sound ridiculous.
He's an idiot.
It really is. It's not a fair conversation. There's so many issues we talked about them, about weighing, and then for him to say something like that is really just taking the gravity of the situation completely away.
Being better than the worst version of your enemy
Yeah.
is an easy game to play.
Yeah.
But a teacher of mine a long time was that if you try and compare your best to someone else's worst, you'll always win, but you won't be very good.
Right.
And that's what he did there.
Yeah.
Well said. Anything else you want to say to this?
I
Senator?
think he got the message.
Okay. Boy,
Over his dinner.
It really is tough to be a freshman.
Gosh.
Anyway, speaking of freshmen, going to talk about a veteran now, a veteran of Hollywood, a veteran of the comedy scene. And I love his work for the most part. Liked him in Dogma. I saw him at stand-up one time. Chris Rock we're talking about. Chris Rock of Bergen County, New Jersey, where I live as well. Well, Mr. Rock has been getting pulled over lately, as in 3 times in the past 2 months. And what he's been doing is actually documenting each time he gets pulled over with a selfie. And it's not like he's smiling like he is in these pictures that you're seeing. Here we go. It's a little bit more serious. And all he says during all of these tweets is, stop by the cops again, or stop by the police, wish me luck. And that's the extent of it. So what happens from here? Ooh, the media, they get really giddy. They say, wow, look what Chris Rock's doing. He's actually documenting every time he's getting pulled over to show that he's being picked on by the police is basically the implication, or being profiled, even worse, because he's not providing any background as to why he's getting pulled over. So I write columns. I'm also what I consider a decent journalist. So I decided to look at the history of Mr. Rock on the road, and it's ugly. He has been arrested, not ticketed, arrested 3 times for vehicular violations. He also even was arrested for a vehicular assault on a youth that he said robbed him. In other words, you're going to take my wallet, I'm going to run you over. And driving with a suspended license as well, which, yes, I've done, all right, because you get the ticket and it goes to the wrong place, you don't pay the ticket, and then, okay, so that we're willing to forgive.
We're not the judge. You don't have to explain.
Okay. The point is, could it be that Mr. Rock was not pulled over because he's black? Because if you see those pictures, 2 are in the dark of night where you can't see anybody who's behind a wheel, but because maybe he ran a red light, had a tail light out, maybe he was speeding. I believe he owns a Lamborghini and a Porsche, and if I got those cars, I'm probably going to speed too. And instead, the media gets up and runs with this and says, this shows racial profiling. They actually say, boy, this is genius that Chris Rock is doing this, and no one bothers, except for me, of course, to check his driving record in the past. Now, that doesn't mean that he was speeding in these situations, but you guys are lawyers. If somebody has a history of doing this stuff, probably means he's going to do it again quickly.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's no context, and that's what you called him out on. You need to provide the context, and without it, all these people are jumping to conclusions, and that doesn't help anybody. We've seen that way too much about way too many things recently.
Yeah.
Now, of course, you could also argue, and I'm not, but you could argue that in terms of context, maybe when he was arrested, he was being harassed because he was black.
4 times.
I'm not saying that's the case.
Yeah,
Like
1, 2,
I
3,
said,
4,
I'm
5.
not arguing it. I'm just saying.
And that's our last word on that. Anyway, we come back. It's yay or nay. This is the Daily Wrap, only on Newsmax.